What's up, Internet? Welcome to my channel. Just got my setup configured. Today, I'm going to walk you through how I went from this, with terrible video and audio quality coming out of the internals on my MacBook, to this, full HD video, reasonable quality audio, for less than $150 total. Having done quite a bit of research on all the options out there, I think this is as cheap as you can go, while still having a good enough setup to get started. Today, I'll walk you through all the different components that I purchased, as well as how to configure them with free software to be up and running in no time. Let's get into it. Okay, here we are. I'm just going to pull up QuickTime, which actually has a built-in video recording functionality. I can go here to new movie recording, and there is the webcam. I can switch it back and forth between the two options. So this is the internal camera, and I can go here and get the RAZER KIYO. So I'm going to put that off to the side there and then pull up some notes that I had about this setup. Awesome. So main goal here was to get a streaming studio setup with reasonable quality for less than 150 bucks. I achieved that goal. It cost me only $113 because I took advantage of some sales on the webcam itself around Black Friday timeframe. But if you went onto Amazon right now and purchased these components, it would be $139 total. I'll probably end up upgrading all of this stuff eventually, but just getting started, I didn't want to spend $1,000+, and so I wanted to come up with the absolute minimum that would achieve a reasonable price point. I took inspiration from a video from the DSLR Shooter channel. Let me pull that up. So he has this, which is essentially a single desk that has his DSLR setup, an external microphone, some lighting, etc. And I really like this concept of having an always ready studio where you can just click record and be off recording, streaming in no time. So I'm going to walk through each of the components here. Obviously, at the $150 price point, you're not going to get a DSLR, you're not going to get a mirrorless camera. So I had to look within the webcam options. There's a few out there. There's some by Logitech. There's some by RAZER. I ended up choosing this one for a few reasons. One, it has that integrated ring light. So eventually I'm sure I'll have some external lighting, but by having a ring light built into the camera itself, it allows me to get started without that extra piece. It was also on sale around Black Friday. I picked it up for $59.99. Currently at 87 bucks, it's still a pretty good deal, I think, for 30 frames a second, 1080p, 60 frames a second, 720p. The light itself is kind of a daylight 5600K color, and so that gives you a nicer color rating than just some of the yellowish incandescent bulbs you might have around the house. In terms of the microphone, there's tons of mics out there. Lots of people go with the Rode Video Micro. That comes in the $60, $70, $80 price point, depending on what kind of sale you find it for. I actually went with this TakStar SGC-598. It's kind of an insane price. It's only 20 bucks, 21, 31. It has a couple of really nice features. There's actually a hardware switch on the mic itself to give you a 10 dB boost. That allows you to get a hotter signal coming off of the microphone so that you can turn your levels down where you're capturing it, either in your camera, your sound recorder, or in this case, my computer, and actually reduce that noise floor a little bit. There's also a high-pass filter where you can flip it on, and it'll cut down some of the noise below 200 hertz. And so that's some of like the background noise that you might have wherever you're recording. Turning that on may help you eliminate some of that low kind of buzzing. I also needed a boom arm. This one, really not picky about what I was choosing. I just kind of went on Amazon, found something super cheap with reasonable reviews. This one is $12.99. Can hold up to 1 kilogram, which is plenty for this particular microphone. Clamps onto the edge of your desk. Really simple, not much to it. The next piece is actually a tricky one. A lot of people struggle with how to do this, how to go from your external microphone connection into the headphone microphone jack on a computer. That's because the ports look very similar. They're both a 3.5 millimeter connection, but the default, the one that has a microphone and a headphone jack, has more of these black rings. So it's a TRRS, where the R is an extra ring there, and we're going down to just a TRS on the microphone. And so this is the kind of adapter that you need to go between those two. If you just try to plug the microphone directly into your MacBook, it's not going to get recognized as an input. This adapter is what you get to allow you to do that. The final piece is just a convenience one. The cable on the microphone is only about 3 inches long. This adapter is only 3.5 inches long, 3 inches long as well. So in order to be able to run that cabling from the microphone and have adjustment capability with the boom arm, I needed to have an extended cable. So this is just a super cheap, basic Amazon Basics 3.5 millimeter extension cable, 6 feet long. This allows me to keep the microphone attached wherever I want it, run that cable down the boom arm into the MacBook, into that adapter, and give me full flexibility on where I actually place this equipment. So that's the full set of equipment. Like I said, I paid only $113. If you went and bought it right now, it would be $139. And in the next part, I'll show you how to get it all set up. Okay, this is just a quick shot of the hardware setup itself. As you can see, I've got the RAZER KIYO webcam mounted there in the center top of my monitor. We can turn the ring light on and off just by adjusting the outermost ring here. The boom arm and microphone are mounted just to the side. It clamps to the table down here at the bottom, and then gives me full swivel. I can go up, down, and around. The connector coming out of the microphone connects into that Amazon Basics extender, which runs down, over, into the Rode TRS to TRRS adapter, which goes into the microphone headphone jack on the computer itself. I mounted the boom arm specifically right here, such that if I move it in frame, it would be just there, so it's just out of frame, keeping it as close to my mouth as possible to get a good audio signal while not actually being distracting and in the frame itself. All right, awesome. So we've got the hardware set up. Next step is to get the two pieces of software that we need to actually make use of this equipment. The first of which is the streaming software OBS, Open Broadcaster Studio, I believe it stands for. And the second one is a video editor, DaVinci Resolve. And this is super easy to do. If you use Homebrew, which is a package manager for Mac OS, you can even do it this way. You can just do brew, cask, install OBS. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to run it. Alternatively, you can just pull up the OBS website. I have it pulled up here. Choose your respective operating system and download that DMG installer. So I already have it here, so I'm going to cancel that download since I don't need it again. All right. And then we would just go ahead, double click the installer, and install it as normal, just like any other piece of software. You drag it into the applications folder, in which case it would show up within your applications. Like I said, I'm actually using OBS to record this right now, so I'm not going to do that. But in a second, we'll go in and actually configure that, and I'll show you the different settings that I had to use to make use of the webcam, to make use of the microphone, as well as a few tweaks that I had to make to get higher quality sound coming out of that microphone. The second piece of software is DaVinci Resolve. It's a professional level video editing software, which happens to have a free version that has almost all of the same functionality. There's a few features that are missing, but for getting started, it's a pretty amazing piece of software. You go here, you provide them with some information about yourself, what you plan to use it for, and then once you do that, it actually sends you off to another page where you can download the DMG installer file. It's quite a big installer. It's 1.5 gigs. I think it takes even a bit more space once you actually install it. But yeah, just go ahead and download that, install it, and then you'll be ready to work with the files coming out of your streaming and recording software to get them edited down for whatever platform you plan to distribute on. The next thing I want to walk through is how to set up OBS to start streaming and recording the video from this webcam and from the microphone. I'll just open up the software. You can see here is the setup that I've been using with the talking head in the bottom right corner. But let's start from scratch. Scene 1, no inputs, etc. The first two settings that we want to configure are the size of the output video. So if we go here to video, we can pick both the canvas resolution and the output resolution. In this case, I'm going to use 1080p for both because I'm working with a full HD monitor, and I know that the webcam resolution, the maximum, is 30 frames a second at 1080p. So that looks good. And we see here the 30 frames a second coming through on the video. The second thing is actually which format we want to save these things in. So that's going to be within the output recording tab. You see all these different recording formats. There's a bunch of different options. The default is MKV. We can also choose MP4, which might be compatible with more players or more editors. However, if we do that, we get this warning here. Essentially, if your power shuts off or for whatever reason the recording dies halfway through, if you choose MP4 or MOV as your format, you're going to lose that file. There's no way to recover it. If we choose MKV, it's just a slightly different container that the video files are stored in, and that allows us to potentially recover from one of those events. And then after the fact, it's easy enough to transfer from the MKV into an MP4 that we can import into our DaVinci Resolve video editing software. So with those two settings applied, I'm going to click OK. And now we need to add the inputs. So the different sources here, the first one, let's add the video so that I'm not just talking over a black screen. We can go video capture device. I'll call it demo RAZER KIYO. Click OK. I need to select the device from this list. If I plugged it in via USB, it should be in this list. The default is for it to be 720p. You can see that that does not take up the full 1080p canvas size, but I can actually increase this to high resolution, which will be that 1080p resolution, at which case it fills the full frame. Awesome. Now, to get audio from the TakStar microphone, we're going to do the same thing. Go into Sources, Audio Input Capture, add new. I'll call it Demo TakStar. OK. Select external microphone. That's what it shows up as coming in through the microphone headphone jack on the computer. Click OK. There's still one issue though. You can see the audio levels are quite high. They're almost always in the yellow and approaching the red, which would cause it to sound super bad and actually clip at the upper end there. So I'm going to reduce the input levels here until that becomes something more reasonable. So if I go to about -10 dB, that looks good. Could go slightly lower even, but for now let's do -10 dB. Okay, looks good. And that is the basic setup to capture video, capture audio from these equipment into OBS. There's just a couple more settings that I'll want to call out to actually maximize the audio quality coming out of the microphone that I didn't get to yet. The first one is that when I was recording with this initially, I was getting this sort of low buzzing noise at all times from the microphone. I did some Googling and I found out that there's actually a way to apply a filter to it to cut some of that out. So if we go into filters for that audio input, we can add one, and that's a noise gate. What this does is essentially takes noises at a certain threshold and cuts them out entirely. When I tried the default settings, it worked okay, but when I was talking slightly more quietly, it would actually cut those out as well. So what I did is I dropped this down to about -42 decibels, and this one to about -30, applied that noise gate, and that did quite a good job of removing some of that low buzzing noise in the background. The other settings that you can play with are actually on the microphone itself. As I called out, there's a +10 dB gain in the hardware, and so turning that on or off allows you to get slightly different levels coming in, can then adjust this upward or downward accordingly. And so I would just suggest playing around with that and seeing what gives you the best results. The final one is that low pass filter. Again, it's going to remove noise below 200 hertz. So I would try it with it on, try it with it off, and see what gives you the best quality result audio coming out of the microphone. I think that's it in terms of setup. At this point, you could either stream or record full frame with this, or you can kind of reduce this down to whatever size you want and then add a screen recording. Here we go. We can go to display capture. Okay, this is demo display capture. Add. Here we go. We want display number 1, which is my external monitor. We'll click OK. And then, so it made it super big. So I'm going to shrink that down until we hit the right size. Snap it to the corner. Move it over. And then it starts to get real trippy here once we see ourselves going all the way back. And then we actually want to change the ordering so that the video camera is on top. So I move that to the bottom, and there we go, all the way back, 30 frames a second. I can move around and watch the wave go backwards. Okay, I think that's it for setup. We've now got OBS configured exactly how we need it for streaming and recording, but there's still one final step that we'll need to take before we're able to take those recordings and edit them within DaVinci Resolve. That's because we chose that MKV file format. You see here some of the files that I've recorded throughout the filming of this video. We actually need to go within OBS, and there's an option under File, Remux Recordings, where we can choose one of these video files. In this case, the component walkthrough one. It will actually convert that from an MKV and make a copy as an MP4 file. If I click Clear, boom, choose the file, open, Remux, only takes a second for that video. Here we are, and then we can see that new file showing up right here within Finder. I can then go within DaVinci Resolve and actually File, Import Media, and choose our component walkthrough, at which point we get this video file here that I can play back accordingly. All right, that's it. If you're like me and want to get started creating video content without breaking the bank, hopefully you found this walkthrough helpful both in terms of choosing what equipment to buy, as well as how to get it set up. Also, if you have thoughts on other cameras or microphones that might be a better value, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. All right, see you in the next one.